My son's wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But my daughter-in-law stood up during the reception and said, "This woman is not part of our family. I want her to leave." I was humiliated in front of 200 people. I walked out crying. For 10 years, I never saw my granddaughter, until the day my door knocked. But let me start from the beginning, because understanding how I ended up at that devastating moment requires knowing the whole story. My name is Eleanor Matthews, and I'm 62 years old now. I was a labor and delivery nurse for 35 years before I retired. I brought hundreds of babies into this world, held countless mothers' hands through their most difficult moments, and celebrated more births than I can count. But the one birth I desperately wanted to witness, my own granddaughter's arrival, I was forbidden from attending. My son Brandon was my only child. His father, my husband Robert, died 5 years before Brandon's wedding from a sudden heart attack at just 57 years old. Robert never got to walk his son down the aisle, never got to meet his granddaughter, never got to see Brandon become the man he'd raised him to be. After Robert died, Brandon and I became even closer, or so I thought. He called me every Sunday. He came over for dinner twice a month. We watched football together. We laughed about memories of his dad. I thought we were a team, facing life's challenges together after our loss. Brandon met Vanessa Chen at his accounting firm, where they both worked. He brought her to meet me about 8 months into their relationship. I'll never forget that first meeting, because even then, I sensed something was off, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It was a Sunday afternoon in March. I'd made pot roast, Brandon's favorite, with roasted potatoes and carrots. I'd cleaned my house top to bottom, put fresh flowers on the dining table, and worn my nicest casual dress. I wanted to make a good impression on the woman my son was falling in love with. Vanessa arrived in designer clothes, carrying an expensive handbag, her hair and makeup absolutely perfect. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Petite, with long dark hair and striking features. But when I hugged her hello, she stiffened in my arms, barely returning the embrace. Throughout dinner, Vanessa picked at her food, commenting that pot roast was too heavy for her diet. She asked why I didn't have organic vegetables. She looked around my modest 3-bedroom house with an expression I can only describe as judgmental disdain. When I showed her photos of Brandon as a child, she barely glanced at them before changing the subject to talk about her own family, her parents' successful import business, their vacation home in Hawaii. After they left, I called my best friend Ruth and confessed my concerns. "She didn't seem very warm," I said carefully, not wanting to be the stereotypical critical mother-in-law. "Give her time," Ruth advised. "Some people are just nervous when meeting parents for the first time." I wanted to believe that. I really did, so I pushed my doubts aside and tried to be welcoming every time I saw Vanessa over the next few months. Brandon proposed to her on New Year's Eve, 6 months after that first meeting. He called me from the restaurant where he'd just gotten down on one knee, his voice trembling with excitement. She said, "Yes, Mom, we're getting married." I was happy for him. Of course I was. My son was in love. He was starting his own family. This was what parents wanted for their children. But I also felt a small knot of worry in my stomach that I couldn't quite explain. The wedding planning began immediately. Vanessa had apparently been planning her dream wedding since she was 12 years old and had very specific ideas about how everything should be. The venue had to be the Grandview Hotel, the most expensive location in the city. The dress had to be custom designed by a specific designer. The flowers had to be imported orchids. The guest list quickly grew to 200 people. "Brandon," I asked during one of our Sunday calls, "how are you two paying for all this? The Grandview Hotel alone must cost a fortune." "Vanessa's parents are covering most of it," he said. "But I'm contributing what I can from my savings." "And they don't want any help from me?" I asked, feeling a little hurt. "I've been saving money specifically for your wedding day. Your father and I always planned to help pay for your wedding." There was a pause. "Actually, Mom, Vanessa's mother said she wants to handle all the planning and payment. She's very particular about these things." "But surely there's something I can contribute," I insisted. "What about the rehearsal dinner? Traditionally, the groom's family pays for that." Another pause. "Let me ask Vanessa and get back to you." He never got back to me. Every time I brought it up, he changed the subject or said Vanessa's family had it under control. 3 months before the wedding, I still hadn't been asked to help with anything. No input on the guest list beyond a request for my own relatives' addresses. No invitation to dress shopping. No requests for family recipes for the menu. Nothing. I was being frozen out of my own son's wedding planning. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I went to the bank and withdrew $10,000 from my savings account, money Robert and I had set aside years ago for Brandon's future. I also spent 2 months hand-making a beautiful wedding quilt, a family tradition. My mother had made one for my wedding, and I'd always planned to make one for Brandon's. I stitched it with love, incorporating patches from Brandon's baby clothes, from Robert's favorite shirt, and from special moments in our family history. I wrapped the quilt in beautiful paper and wrote out the check, planning to present both gifts at the rehearsal dinner, which was scheduled for the night before the wedding at an expensive Italian restaurant. The rehearsal dinner was my first real glimpse of the family dynamics I was about to become part of, and I should have seen the warning signs more clearly. Vanessa's parents, Howard and Linda Chen, were wealthy and made sure everyone knew it. Linda wore more jewelry than I'd ever seen on one person outside of a red carpet event. Howard talked loudly about his business deals and country club membership. They'd invited about 40 people to this intimate rehearsal dinner, and I knew maybe 5 of them. I sat at a table with my sister Claire and her husband, feeling increasingly out of place. Brandon was at the head table with Vanessa and her parents, barely looking in my direction all evening. When it came time for toasts, Howard stood first. "Tomorrow my Princess Vanessa marries the man of her dreams," he announced. "Brandon, you're getting the best prize in the world. My daughter is perfect, and I know you'll work hard to deserve her." The speech was condescending toward my son, but Brandon just smiled and nodded. Then Linda spoke about how much money they'd spent to create Vanessa's dream day and how happy they were to welcome Brandon into their family. Notice the wording. Brandon was being welcomed into their family, not Vanessa joining ours, not 2 families uniting. Their family was absorbing my son. No one asked me to make a toast. No one acknowledged me at all except my own relatives. I felt like a ghost at my own son's rehearsal dinner. At the end of the evening, I approached Brandon as people were leaving. "Honey, I have gifts for you and Vanessa. Can we find a quiet moment?" "Mom, we're pretty exhausted," he said, glancing at Vanessa, who was watching us from across the room with narrowed eyes. "Can it wait until after the honeymoon?" "It's a check and a special quilt I made," I said. "It won't take long, please." Vanessa walked over. "Brandon, my parents want to take photos with us outside. We need to go." "Just give me 2 minutes," Brandon said to her. Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she nodded and walked away. I pulled out the card with the check and the wrapped quilt. "This is from me and your dad," I said, my voice catching on Robert's name. "He would have wanted you to have this to start your marriage." Brandon opened the card and saw the $10,000 check. His eyes widened. "Mom, this is too much." "It's not too much. It's what we saved for you. And this," I handed him the quilt, "is a family tradition. Open it later when you have time to really look at it. I put pieces of your childhood in it, pieces of your dad. It's your history." Brandon hugged me, and for a moment I felt close to my son again. "Thank you, Mom. This means everything." But then Vanessa's voice cut through the moment. "Brandon, we're waiting." He pulled away, grabbed the gifts, and hurried to join his fiancée. I watched him hand the quilt and card to one of the groomsmen to hold, barely glancing at them again. I should have known then. I should have seen that my son was already being pulled away from me, that Vanessa was systematically erasing my presence from his life. But I was too focused on being a good mother, on not being the interfering mother-in-law stereotype. So I ignored my instincts and showed up to the wedding the next day with hope and love in my heart. The wedding day was absolutely beautiful weather-wise. Sunny 72 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. I'd bought a dress specifically for this occasion, an elegant tea-length dress in a soft lavender color. I'd gotten my hair done at a salon that morning. I'd worn the pearl necklace Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look my best for my son's special day, to make him proud, to honor his father's memory. The ceremony was at 3 p.m. I arrived at the Grandview Hotel at 2:30, my sister Claire by my side for moral support. The ballroom was stunning, I have to admit. Thousands of white orchids, crystal chandeliers, white silk draping everywhere. It looked like something from a magazine. An usher I didn't know approached us. Names? Eleanor Matthews and Claire Dawson, I said. I'm the groom's mother. He checked his list, looking confused. I don't see your name on the family seating chart. There must be a mistake, I said, staying calm. I'm Brandon's mother, his only parent, actually. The usher disappeared and came back with Vanessa's mother, Linda. She looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. Eleanor, you're here. Of course I'm here, I said. It's my son's wedding. Yes, well, there's been a seating complication. We'll have to put you in the back with some of the other guests. The back? I'm the mother of the groom. Don't I sit in the front row? Linda's smile was ice cold. Vanessa's family is quite large, and we need the front rows for immediate family. You understand? I am immediate family, I said, my voice rising slightly. I'm Brandon's mother. We'll seat you in the fourth row, Linda said firmly. That's the best we can do. She walked away before I could protest further. Claire squeezed my hand. Breathe, Elle. Don't let them ruin this day. We were seated in the fourth row, behind Vanessa's extended family, some of whom I'd never even met. I could see the back of Brandon's head up at the altar, but I couldn't make eye contact with him. When he turned to watch Vanessa walk down the aisle, his eyes scanned the crowd, but never landed on me. I don't think he even knew where I was sitting. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Traditional vows, a string quartet, Vanessa looking absolutely stunning in her designer gown. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," everyone applauded. I clapped too, tears running down my face, though they weren't entirely tears of joy. They were also tears of loss, of realizing my son was entering a family that had no place for me in it. The reception started at 5 p.m. in the hotel's grand ballroom. Again, I was seated far from the head table, at a table with distant cousins I barely knew and some of Brandon's old college friends. I could see my son at the head table, laughing with Vanessa and her family, but he was so far away and there were so many people between us. Dinner was served, an elaborate 5-course meal. The speeches began. Vanessa's father spoke again about his princess and how much money he'd spent. The best man, one of Brandon's college friends, told funny stories. The maid of honor, Vanessa's sister, gushed about how perfect Vanessa and Brandon were together. No one asked the mother of the groom to speak. No one acknowledged me at all. I sat at my distant table, pushing food around my plate, feeling increasingly invisible. Then came the traditional dances. First dance for the bride and groom. Then Brandon was supposed to dance with his mother and Vanessa with her father. I stood up, expecting to be called to the dance floor. The DJ announced, "And now the groom will dance with his mother." I started walking toward the dance floor, but Brandon didn't move toward me. Instead, Vanessa's mother, Linda, stood up and walked to Brandon. The DJ corrected himself. "Sorry, folks, I meant the groom will dance with his mother-in-law, who has been like a mother to him." I stopped dead in my tracks. My son was dancing the mother-son dance with his mother-in-law instead of with me. I stood there in the middle of the ballroom, frozen, as Brandon took Linda's hand and they danced to "What a Wonderful World," the song Robert and I had chosen for our wedding dance 35 years ago. People were staring at me. I could hear whispers. My sister rushed over and guided me back to our table. "Ella, sit down. Don't make a scene." "He's dancing with her instead of me," I whispered, my voice breaking. "That was supposed to be our dance. I know, honey." I know, I wanted to leave right then. I wanted to walk out of that ballroom and never look back. But I stayed because he was still my son and I was still his mother, and I loved him despite everything. After the dance, dessert was served. A massive 7-tier cake was wheeled out. Champagne flowed. People got drunker and louder. I sat at my table, nursing a glass of wine I wasn't really drinking, watching my son enjoy his wedding celebration from a distance. Then, around 8 p.m., it happened. Vanessa stood up from the head table. She tapped her champagne glass with a fork, calling for attention. The room gradually quieted down. Everyone turned to look at her. She was radiant in her wedding gown, absolutely glowing. "Thank you all so much for being here on our special day," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. Brandon and I are so blessed to be surrounded by people who love and support us. People applauded. I even clapped politely. As we begin our new life together, Vanessa continued, it's important to us that we're surrounded only by positive energy, only by people who truly want the best for our marriage and our future family. Something in her tone made my stomach drop. I felt a sense of dread building. Unfortunately, Vanessa said, her voice hardening, not everyone here falls into that category. She turned and looked directly at me. Our eyes locked across the crowded ballroom. 200 people followed her gaze to see who she was looking at. Eleanor Matthews, Vanessa said clearly, pointing at me. Brandon's biological mother, you have done nothing but try to interfere with our relationship from the beginning. You've been passive-aggressive, you've tried to control Brandon, and you've made it clear you don't approve of me. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I felt my face burning. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. What? I managed to say, but my voice was too quiet to carry. I will not start my marriage with your negative energy and manipulation, Vanessa continued. This woman is not part of our family. She is not welcome in our lives. I want her to leave, now. The ballroom was absolutely silent, except for the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. 200 people stared at me. Some looked shocked. Some looked uncomfortable. Some, particularly Vanessa's family and friends, looked approving. I looked desperately at Brandon, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his new wife she was wrong, to stand up for his mother. He was sitting frozen at the head table, his face pale. Our eyes met. Brandon, I said, loud enough for him to hear. Please. He looked at Vanessa, then back at me. For a moment, I thought he would do the right thing. I thought my son would choose his mother, would defend me against these horrible accusations. But he didn't. He looked down at his plate and said nothing. Vanessa's voice came again, triumphant now. Security, please escort Mrs. Matthews from the premises. 2 large men in suits appeared at my table. Ma'am, you need to come with us. My sister Claire jumped up. This is outrageous. Elle has done nothing wrong. Claire, it's okay, I said, my voice shaking. I didn't want to make things worse. I didn't want to ruin Brandon's wedding day more than it was already ruined. I stood up on trembling legs. The walk from my table to the ballroom exit was the longest walk of my life. 200 people watching me, some whispering, some filming on their phones, some looking away, embarrassed to witness my humiliation. I held my head as high as I could, but tears were streaming down my face. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. Brandon was still looking down at his plate. He never met my eyes. He let me be thrown out of his wedding without saying a single word in my defense. The security guards escorted me all the way to the hotel entrance. One of them, an older gentleman, whispered, I'm sorry, ma'am. I have a mother too. This isn't right. His kindness broke something in me. I started sobbing. Not quiet tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that shook my whole body. Claire had followed us out and put her arms around me. Let's get you home, she said softly. We drove back to my house in silence. Claire stayed with me that night as I cried myself to sleep on the couch, still wearing my lavender dress. The pearls Robert had given me now feeling like a weight around my neck. That was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it became the day I lost my son. The morning after the wedding, I woke up on my couch still wearing my lavender dress, my face swollen from crying, my entire body aching. For a few blissful seconds, I forgot what had happened. Then it all came crashing back. The pointing finger, the accusations, the 200 witnesses, my son's silence. Claire had fallen asleep in the armchair across from me. She stirred when she heard me moving. Elle, how are you feeling? Like my heart's been ripped out, I said honestly. Over the next few days, I waited for Brandon to call. Surely once the wedding excitement died down, once he and Vanessa were alone, he would realize how cruel she'd been. He would call to apologize, to explain, to make things right. But my phone stayed silent. A week passed. Then 2 weeks. They were supposed to be on their honeymoon in Bali, but I'd expected at least a text message. Nothing came. 3 weeks after the wedding, I finally broke down and called Brandon's cell phone. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Hi, this is Brandon Matthews. I can't take your call right now. Leave a message. Brandon, it's Mom, I said, my voice shaking. Please call me. We need to talk about what happened at the wedding. I love you. Please call me back. He didn't call back. I tried again 2 days later. This time, the phone went straight to voicemail as if it had been turned off or I'd been blocked. I left another message anyway. Brandon, I don't understand what's happening. Please talk to me. Whatever Vanessa told you about me, it's not true. I've never tried to interfere with your relationship. I just want my son back. Still no response. I tried texting. The messages showed as delivered but never as read. Either he wasn't seeing them or he was deliberately ignoring me. Ruth came over with groceries and found me sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my phone. Still nothing? I shook my head. It's like he's vanished. Like I never had a son at all. Have you thought about going to their house? Ruth asked gently. I don't even know where they live, I admitted. Brandon never gave me their address. He said they were moving after the wedding, but he never told me where. Ruth squeezed my hand. Give it time. He'll come around. He's probably just caught up in newlywed life. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. I sent birthday cards to Brandon's old apartment, not knowing if they'd be forwarded. I sent Christmas cards. I sent texts on holidays. Every single attempt at contact was met with silence. 6 months after the wedding, I hired a private investigator to find Brandon's new address. It felt desperate and slightly crazy, but I was desperate. The investigator found them living in a townhouse in an upscale neighborhood about 30 miles from me. I drove there on a Saturday afternoon, my heart pounding. I knocked on the door, expecting confrontation, but hoping for reconciliation. Vanessa answered. She was visibly pregnant, maybe 5 or 6 months along. The sight of her pregnant belly hit me like a physical blow. My son was having a baby, and I hadn't known. What are you doing here? Vanessa demanded. I came to see Brandon, I said. Please, I just want to talk to him. He doesn't want to talk to you. You're not welcome here. You're pregnant, I said, stating the obvious. When is the baby due? That's none of your business, Vanessa said coldly. I'm going to be a grandmother. That makes it my business. No, Vanessa said firmly. You're not going to be this baby's grandmother. You're nothing to us. Brandon has made his choice. He chose me and our new family. You need to accept that and move on with your life. She started to close the door. I put my hand out to stop it. Please, let me just see Brandon for 5 minutes. Let me hear from him that he doesn't want me in his life. Brandon! Vanessa called over her shoulder. Your mother is here, I heard footsteps. Then Brandon appeared behind Vanessa. He looked older, tired. When he saw me, something flickered across his face, maybe regret, maybe pain. But it vanished quickly. Mom, you need to leave, he said quietly. Brandon, please. We need to talk about the wedding. About what Vanessa said. About why you won't return my calls. There's nothing to talk about, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Vanessa told me how you've been. The passive-aggressive comments about her cooking, about her family, about our relationship. The way you tried to take over the wedding planning. The way you've tried to control my life. I never did any of that. I protested. I made one pot roast dinner that she didn't like. I offered to help pay for the wedding and was refused. I gave you a check and a handmade quilt with love. That's all I did. That's not how Vanessa experienced it, Brandon said. Then Vanessa is lying to you. I said, my voice rising. I'm your mother. I've loved you your entire life. Please don't believe her lies. Brandon's face hardened. Don't call my wife a liar. She's pregnant with my child. She's my family now. You need to respect that. I am your family, I said desperately. I'm your mother. I raised you. Your father and I gave you everything. My father is dead, Brandon said harshly. And you need to let me go. I'm asking you, Mom. Please stop trying to contact me. Stop showing up here. Let me live my life. It felt like he'd stabbed me. You're asking me to just disappear? To pretend I don't have a son? I'm asking you to respect my decision and my marriage. Vanessa put her hand on Brandon's arm possessively. We're done here. If you show up again, we'll call the police and file a restraining order for harassment. The door closed in my face. I stood on their porch for a long moment, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. My son had chosen his wife over his mother. He'd chosen her lies over my truth, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. I drove home in a daze and called Ruth from my car. He told me to leave him alone. He said if I contact him again, they'll file a restraining order. Oh, Elle, Ruth breathed. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do, I sobbed. How do I just stop being his mother? How do I turn off 32 years of love? You don't, Ruth said gently. You just learn to live with the pain. And that's what I tried to do. I went back to my life, or what was left of it. I volunteered at the hospital where I used to work. I joined a book club. I took up gardening seriously, spending hours in my backyard creating something beautiful to distract myself from the ugliness in my heart. 4 months later, in February, I saw the birth announcement on Facebook. Someone from Brandon's friend group had shared it publicly before realizing their privacy settings were wrong. Baby Lily Rose Matthews, born February 14th, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. The photo showed Brandon and Vanessa in a hospital room, beaming at a tiny wrapped bundle. I had a granddaughter. She was born on Valentine's Day, and I'd never get to meet her. I printed the photo and put it in a frame on my mantel. Ruth thought it was unhealthy, but I didn't care. She was my granddaughter, whether Vanessa liked it or not. Over the next 9 years, I caught glimpses of Lily's life through social media. Vanessa posted photos constantly, though her privacy settings eventually tightened after she realized people were sharing them. But occasionally, someone would share a public post, or I'd see a photo through a mutual acquaintance. First birthday party. Lily smashing a pink cake into her face. I sent a card with a savings bond to Brandon's address. It came back marked, "Return to sender." First day of kindergarten. Lily in a little uniform, holding a frozen backpack. She looked exactly like Brandon had at that age. School plays, dance recitals, Halloween costumes, Christmas mornings. I saw fragments of my granddaughter's childhood through pixels on a screen, never in person, never able to hold her or smell her baby shampoo or hear her laugh. Every year on Brandon's birthday, I sent a card. Every Christmas, I sent a gift. Everything came back. After the 3rd year, I stopped sending physical items, but I still wrote cards that I kept in a drawer, unsent, just to process my feelings. I attended grief counseling. My therapist said I was experiencing ambiguous loss, grieving someone who was still alive but absent from my life. It was, she said, one of the most painful types of grief because there was no closure, no funeral, no definitive end. Have you considered that Brandon might be in an emotionally abusive relationship? My therapist asked during one session. Isolating someone from their family is a classic control tactic. I've thought about it, I admitted. But what can I do? He's an adult. He made his choice. Sometimes people in abusive situations need multiple opportunities to escape before they're ready, she said. Don't close the door completely. Let him know you're there if he ever needs you. So I kept a light on, metaphorically speaking. I kept my phone number the same in case he ever wanted to call. I kept living in the same house in case he ever wanted to come home. I existed in a state of perpetual waiting, hoping that someday my son would come back to me. Years 5 and 6 were the hardest. The acute grief had faded into a chronic ache, but it was always there, a constant background pain. I threw myself into my volunteer work, into my friendships, into trying to build a life that didn't revolve around the child who'd abandoned me. I started dating a widower named Frank, who I met at the hospital. Nothing serious, just companionship, someone to have dinner with, someone who understood loss. He'd lost his wife to cancer and had been estranged from his daughter for different reasons. We were 2 broken people finding comfort in each other's company. In year 7, my sister Claire was diagnosed with breast cancer. She fought it bravely and survived, but it made me acutely aware of my own mortality. I was approaching 62. How many years did I have left? Would I die without ever meeting my granddaughter? Without ever reconciling with my son? I updated my will, leaving everything to Brandon despite everything. He was still my son. Lily was still my granddaughter. If I died, at least they'd have something from me, even if they'd rejected me in life. Year 8 brought the pandemic. The world shut down, and I spent months alone in my house, isolated not just from my son, but from everyone. Ruth would drop groceries on my porch, and we'd talk through the window. Frank got COVID and was hospitalized for 3 weeks. I wasn't allowed to visit him. During those long, lonely months, I thought about Brandon constantly. Was he safe? Was Vanessa? Was Lily? They were just 30 miles away, but they might as well have been on another planet. I had no way of knowing if my family was healthy or suffering. I sent one email during the pandemic to Brandon's work email address that I found through LinkedIn. I hope you, Vanessa, and Lily are safe and healthy during these difficult times. I think about you every day. I love you, Mom. He never responded. Year 9 arrived, and with it came my retirement celebration from the hospital where I'd volunteered. My friends threw me a small party. People gave speeches about my dedication, my kindness, my impact on their lives. It was lovely, but there was a hollow feeling in my chest. The person I most wanted to celebrate with wasn't there. That night, Ruth stayed late to help me clean up. "You know, Elle," she said carefully, "you've done everything you can. You've left the door open. You've made yourself available. At some point, you have to accept that he might never come back." "I know," I said. "I've accepted it intellectually. But my heart hasn't caught up yet." "Maybe it never will," Ruth said gently. "Maybe you just learned to live with the hole in your heart where he used to be." 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon in October, everything changed. I was in my garden, pulling weeds from around my rose bushes, when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I wasn't expecting anyone. Ruth usually called before coming over. Frank was at a doctor's appointment. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees, and walked around to the front of the house. A silver SUV was parked in my driveway. The driver's side door opened and Brandon stepped out. My heart stopped. I literally felt it skip a beat in my chest. It had been nearly 10 years since I'd last seen my son, and he'd aged. There were lines around his eyes, gray in his hair at the temples. He looked exhausted, his clothes rumpled, his face drawn. The passenger door opened. Vanessa emerged, and I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, significant weight. Her hair was covered by a scarf. Her skin had a grayish pallor. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone in pain. The back door opened, and a little girl climbed out. Lily. She was 9 years old now, tall for her age, with Brandon's dark hair and his brown eyes. She looked scared. For a long moment, we all just stood there, frozen in a tableau of estrangement and desperation. Brandon spoke first. "Mom, we need help." 3 words. After 10 years of silence, 3 words. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to slam my door in his face the way he'd slammed his in mine. I wanted to tell him he'd made his choice, that he couldn't just show up after a decade and expect me to welcome him with open arms. But I couldn't. Because he was my son. Because that was my granddaughter. Because despite everything, I still loved him. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Vanessa spoke, her voice weak and raspy. "I have cancer. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I've been in treatment for 3 months, but the doctors say there's nothing more they can do. I have maybe 6 months left." The words hung in the air. "Stage 4, 6 months. Dying. I don't understand," I said. "Why are you here?" Brandon's eyes filled with tears. "We need help. With Lily. We can't manage everything on our own. Vanessa's parents are in China dealing with a family emergency. My friends have their own kids and jobs. We have nowhere else to turn. So I'm your last resort," I said, and I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. After 10 years of being told I'm toxic, after being thrown out of your wedding, after being rejected over and over, you show up now because you need something from me. "I know," Brandon said, his voice breaking. "I know how this looks. I know what we did to you was unforgivable. But please, Mom, not for me, not for Vanessa. For Lily. She doesn't deserve to suffer because of our mistakes." I looked at the little girl standing by the car, her eyes wide and frightened. She didn't know me. I was a stranger to her. But she was my granddaughter and she needed help. "How much help do you need?" I asked. "Vanessa needs someone with her during the day," Brandon said. "I have to work to keep our insurance. Lily needs to be picked up from school, helped with homework, given dinner. We need help with housework, with errands, with everything. You want me to be a caregiver for the woman who destroyed my relationship with my son?" I asked. Vanessa spoke again, tears running down her hollow cheeks. "I know I was wrong. I know I was cruel to you. I was jealous and insecure. I thought if Brandon stayed close to you, he'd see that I wasn't good enough. So I pushed you out. It was the worst thing I've ever done, and now I'm dying, and I can't undo it. But please don't punish Lily for my sins." I stood there in my garden, covered in dirt, facing the family that had rejected me, and I had to make a decision. I could turn them away, tell them they'd made their bed and now they had to lie in it. I could have my revenge, my vindication, my proof that they needed me after all. Or I could be the person I'd always tried to be, the mother I'd always been, and help them despite everything. "Come inside," I finally said. "Let's talk." They followed me into the house, this fractured family that had once been mine. Brandon carried a small suitcase. Vanessa moved slowly, one hand on Lily's shoulder for support. Lily looked around my living room with wide, curious eyes, taking in the photos on the mantel, including the framed picture of her as a newborn that I'd kept all these years. "You have a picture of me," Lily said softly. Her first words to me. "I've always had pictures of you," I replied. "I'm your grandmother, even though we've never met." Lily looked at her mother, confused. "But you said I didn't have a grandmother. You said she died before I was born." The words hit me like a slap. "They told you I was dead?" Brandon had the decency to look ashamed. "Vanessa thought it would be easier than explaining why you weren't in our lives." "Easier for whom?" I asked, my voice sharp. But then I looked at Vanessa, at her frail body, and the scarf covering what was likely a bald head from chemotherapy, and some of my anger deflated. She was dying. She was a 39-year-old woman dying of cancer, leaving behind a 9-year-old daughter. Whatever she'd done to me, this was punishment enough. We sat in my living room, the four of us arranged awkwardly on furniture that had never held this particular configuration of family members. I made tea that no one really drank. We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before I finally spoke. "I need to understand what you're asking of me," I said. "Specifically." Brandon pulled out a piece of paper where he'd written a list. His hands were shaking as he read it. "Vanessa has chemotherapy appointments 3 times a week. She needs someone to drive her and stay with her during treatment, which usually takes 4 to 5 hours. On the days she doesn't have chemo, she's too weak to be alone. She needs help with basic tasks like showering, getting dressed, preparing meals." He paused, took a breath, continued. "Lily needs to be picked up from school at 3:15 every day. She has homework that she needs help with. She needs dinner, help with her bath, bedtime routine. She's never been away from Vanessa overnight, so she's scared and struggling." "What about your job?" I asked. "Can't you work from home?" "I've already used all my leave taking care of Vanessa during her diagnosis and initial treatment," Brandon said. "If I take more time off, I'll lose my job and we'll lose our health insurance. Vanessa's treatment, even though it's not working, costs thousands of dollars a month even with insurance." "What about hospice care?" I asked gently. "If the doctors say there's nothing more they can do, wouldn't hospice be more appropriate than continuing treatment?" Vanessa spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not ready to give up. The doctors say the chemo might give me a few more months. I want every day I can get with Lily. Even if it means feeling sick, even if it means pain. I'm not ready to die, I understood that. What mother would be ready to leave her 9-year-old daughter? And what happens after?" I asked, not wanting to be cruel but needing to know. "After Vanessa passes, what happens to Lily then?" "She stays with me," Brandon said. "But I'll need help. I can't do this alone. I work 50 hours a week. Lily will need stability, routine, someone who's there for her." "You're asking me to uproot my entire life to care for the family that rejected me for 10 years, I said flatly. "Yes," Brandon said, meeting my eyes for the first time. "I know I have no right to ask this. I know what we did to you was unforgivable. But I'm asking anyway because I'm desperate and because you're the only family I have left." "You had family 10 years ago," I reminded him. "You chose to throw that family away." "I know. And I've regretted it every single day since. That surprised me." "You have?" Brandon's face crumpled. "Mom, I've been miserable. I knew almost immediately after the wedding that I'd made a terrible mistake. Vanessa wasn't the person I thought she was. She was controlling, manipulative, jealous of anyone who took my attention. She monitored my phone, my emails, my friendships. She isolated me from everyone I'd ever known." "Then why didn't you leave?" I asked. "Why didn't you call me?" "Because I was ashamed," Brandon said, tears running down his face. "Because I'd chosen her over you at the wedding. Because I'd let her kick you out without defending you. How could I come back after that? How could I admit I'd been so wrong?" "By picking up the phone," I said. "By saying, 'Mom, I made a mistake.' That's all it would have taken. I know that now. But at the time, I was trapped. And then Lily was born, and I couldn't leave because she needed her mother. And Vanessa was a good mother to Lily, even if she was a terrible wife to me. I stayed for Lily." I looked at Vanessa. She was crying silently, her thin shoulders shaking. "Do you have anything to say to me?" I asked her. Vanessa looked up, her eyes red and swollen. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. You didn't deserve it. Brandon was right about you. You were never interfering or controlling. You were just a mother who loved her son. And I took him away from you because I was insecure and jealous and stupid. Why? I asked. Why did you do it? Because I grew up in a family where love was conditional, Vanessa said. My parents loved me when I was perfect, when I achieved things, when I made them look good. I was terrified that Brandon would realize I wasn't perfect and leave me. When I saw how much he loved you, how close you two were, I saw you as competition. I thought if I eliminated you from his life, he'd love me more, need me more. But that's not how love works, I said. I know that now. But by the time I realized it, I'd already done so much damage. I'd built this wall of lies between Brandon and you. I'd convinced myself that you really were a threat. And then years passed and it became impossible to undo. How do you admit you've been wrong for a decade? You pick up the phone, I said again. You say I was wrong. That's all it takes. But I didn't, Vanessa said. And now I'm dying and I can't undo any of it. All I can do is beg you to help my daughter, who's innocent in all of this. I looked at Lily, who was sitting very still on my couch, taking in this conversation that was probably too adult for her to fully understand. She was beautiful, this granddaughter I'd never met. She had Brandon's eyes, his serious expression. She had Robert's nose. She was my family, even though she didn't know me. Lily, I said gently, do you understand what's happening? She nodded. Mommy is sick. The doctors can't make her better. She's going to die. The matter-of-fact way she said it broke my heart. 9 years old, and she was already facing loss. How do you feel about that? I asked. Lily's lip trembled. Scared, sad, angry. I don't want my mommy to die. I know, sweetheart. I know. Daddy says you're going to help us. Are you? And there it was, the question that everything came down to. Was I going to help them? I looked at each of them in turn. Brandon, my son who'd betrayed me but who was clearly suffering. Vanessa, the woman who destroyed my relationship with my son but who was dying and terrified. Lily, the innocent child who'd been caught up in adult mistakes and was about to lose her mother. Ruth's voice echoed in my mind. At some point, you have to accept that he might never come back. But he had come back. Not in the way I'd imagined, not with a simple apology and reconciliation. He'd come back desperate and broken, needing help. My therapist's voice, don't close the door completely. Let him know you're there if he ever needs you. I'd left the door open for 10 years, and now, finally, Brandon had walked through it. But could I really do this? Could I care for the woman who'd ruined my life? Could I forgive my son for choosing her over me? Could I step into this messy, painful situation and help without expecting anything in return? I need to think about this, I said finally. I need time to process what you're asking. We don't have much time, Brandon said. Vanessa's parents are in China for another 2 weeks. I've been taking time off work, but I'm out of leave. I have to be back in the office on Monday. Today was Tuesday. That gave me less than a week to decide whether to completely upend my life. Can you stay somewhere else tonight? I asked. I need space to think clearly. Brandon nodded. We'll go to a hotel. Can we come back tomorrow? To talk more? Tomorrow evening, I agreed. 6 o'clock. After they left, I called Ruth immediately. She came over within 20 minutes and I told her everything. What are you going to do? Ruth asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to help. She's my granddaughter. I've waited 10 years to meet her. And Brandon is my son, despite everything. But, Ruth prompted, but another part of me is so angry. They rejected me for a decade. They told Lily I was dead. They made me suffer for years. And now they show up expecting me to fix their problems? So you're considering saying no? I'm considering it, I said. Would that make me a terrible person? Ruth was quiet for a moment. I don't think so. I think it would make you human. You've been hurt. Deeply hurt. You don't owe them anything. But Lily didn't hurt me. Lily doesn't deserve to suffer because of her parents' mistakes. No, she doesn't, Ruth agreed. But there are other options. Brandon could hire a home health aide. He could take family leave. He could reach out to other family members or friends. He said I was his only option. Is that true? Or is it just convenient? That was a good question. Brandon had always been resourceful. Was I really his only option? Or was I just the easiest option because he knew I'd have a hard time saying no to my granddaughter? I spent that night awake, wrestling with the decision. I thought about Robert and what he would want me to do. He'd always been more forgiving than me, more willing to see the best in people. Ella, I could almost hear him saying, she's our granddaughter. We don't abandon family. But Robert had never been thrown out of his son's wedding. Robert had died before he could experience this particular betrayal. The next morning, I called my therapist for an emergency session. We talked for an hour about boundaries, about forgiveness, about the difference between being kind and being a doormat. If you do this, my therapist said, you need to do it with clear boundaries. You need to protect yourself emotionally. You can help without being a martyr. What would that look like? I asked. It means you help on your terms. You don't move into their house and become their servant. You establish what you're willing to do and what you're not. You require Brandon and Vanessa to take responsibility for their actions. You don't let them rug sweep the past 10 years. That made sense. I could help without erasing my own pain. That afternoon, I made a list. What I was willing to do, what I wasn't willing to do, what I needed from Brandon and Vanessa before I would agree to help. When they arrived at 6 p.m. that evening, I had my list ready. I've decided I'm willing to help, I said. But there are conditions. Relief flooded Brandon's face. Anything, Mom, anything you need. First, I said, we talk about the past 10 years. All of it. I need to hear from both of you exactly what happened, why you made the choices you made, and genuine apologies. Not just, I'm sorry because I need something from you now, but real acknowledgement of the harm you caused. Brandon and Vanessa both nodded. Second, I help on my terms. I'm not moving into your house. I'm not available 24/7. I'll establish a schedule that works for me, and you'll respect it. I have my own life, and I'm not giving it up entirely. That's fair, Brandon said. Third, Lily, I want a real relationship with her, not just as a caregiver, but as her grandmother. That means you tell her the truth about the past, age appropriately. You don't hide things from her or lie about why we've been estranged. Vanessa looked uncertain about this, but nodded. Okay, fourth, therapy. For all of us. Family therapy, if you're willing. Individual therapy for Lily, to help her process her mother's illness and death. We can do that, Brandon agreed. And fifth, I said, looking directly at my son, after this is over. After Vanessa passes and the crisis is past, you don't disappear from my life again. We work on rebuilding our relationship. You let me be a grandmother to Lily. You don't get to use me in your emergency and then discard me again when things are stable. Brandon's eyes filled with tears. Mom, I promise. I will never shut you out again. I swear it. Do you swear it, or does Vanessa swear it? I asked, looking at his wife. Because 10 years ago, you made choices based on what Vanessa wanted. How do I know that won't happen again? Because I'm dying, Vanessa said bluntly. I'll be gone and you'll be here. And Brandon needs you in his life. Lily needs you. I was wrong to separate you from them, and I'm using my last months on Earth to try to fix that mistake. It was brutally honest, and somehow that honesty meant more than any flowery apology. All right, I said. Then we start tomorrow. But tonight we talk, really talk. I need to understand everything. We sat in my living room until nearly midnight. Brandon and Vanessa told me everything about the past 10 years. How Vanessa had convinced Brandon that I'd been secretly undermining their relationship with subtle comments and manipulations that I'd supposedly made. How she'd convinced him that cutting me off was necessary for their marriage to thrive. How she'd monitored his phone and emails to make sure he wasn't contacting me. She read every text I sent, Brandon admitted. Every email. If I mentioned you, even in passing, she'd accuse me of choosing you over her. Why did you let her do that? I asked. You're a grown man. You could have stood up to her. I should have, Brandon said. But she was pregnant, and then Lily was born, and I convinced myself I was sacrificing for my family. That being a good husband and father meant prioritizing my wife's feelings over my mother's. But your wife's feelings were based on lies, I pointed out. I know that now. I think I knew it then too, but I was too deep in to admit it. Vanessa shared her own story. How she'd been raised by emotionally unavailable parents who treated her more like a trophy than a daughter. How she'd developed an anxious attachment style that made her constantly afraid of being abandoned. How she'd seen me as a threat instead of an ally. I wish I could go back and do it differently, Vanessa said. But I can't. All I can do is try to make sure Lily doesn't lose both her mother and her grandmother. Please don't let my mistakes cost her a relationship with you." By the time they left that night, I was emotionally exhausted, but also strangely relieved. The truth was out. The past was acknowledged. We couldn't undo it, but at least we weren't pretending it hadn't happened. The next morning, I started my new role as caregiver and grandmother. I arrived at their townhouse at 8 a.m. Brandon was getting ready for work, looking stressed in his suit and tie. Vanessa was still in bed, too exhausted to get up. Lily was eating cereal in the kitchen, still in her pajamas. "Hi, Lily," I said gently. "Your dad said you have school today. Should we pick out an outfit together?" She looked at me warily. "You're really my grandma? You're not dead?" "I'm really your grandma. And no, I'm not dead. I've been alive this whole time, wanting to meet you. Why didn't you meet me before?" I'd promised honesty, so I gave it to her, age appropriately. "Your mom and I had a disagreement when your dad and mom got married. It was a grown-up problem, and it meant I didn't get to be part of your life until now. But I always knew about you. I always loved you, even though we'd never met. Do you have pictures of me?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the folder I'd created over the years, saved images from social media posts that had leaked through privacy settings. "I saved every picture of you I could find." Her eyes widened. "You did?" "Of course. You're my granddaughter. I never stopped wanting to know you." Something in Lily's expression softened. "Can I call you Grandma?" My throat tightened with emotion. I would love that more than anything. The next 6 months were the hardest and most meaningful of my life. I helped Vanessa through her chemo appointments, holding her hand while poison dripped into her veins, trying to kill cancer cells that were too aggressive to stop. I helped her shower when she was too weak to stand alone. I cooked meals that she usually couldn't eat because the chemo killed her appetite. I sat with her on her worst days, when she was too sick to do anything but cry. I picked Lily up from school every day at 3:15. We did homework together at my kitchen table. I taught her to bake cookies, just like I taught Brandon when he was her age. I read her bedtime stories. I braided her hair. I became the grandmother I'd always wanted to be. Brandon and I went to family therapy every Wednesday evening. It was painful, rehashing years of hurt and betrayal, but it was also healing. We both apologized, cried, and slowly rebuilt trust. Vanessa's health declined rapidly. By month 3, she was bedridden most days. By month 5, hospice nurses came daily. She'd stopped treatment and accepted that she was dying. One afternoon, about 2 weeks before she passed, Vanessa asked to speak to me alone. Brandon took Lily to the park, giving us privacy. "I need to thank you," Vanessa said from her hospital bed in the living room. "You didn't have to help us. After what I did to you, most people would have told us to go to hell." "I thought about it," I admitted. "What changed your mind?" "Lily. And the fact that Brandon was finally ready to come home to me. I'd waited 10 years for that. I wasn't going to waste it on revenge." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "I'm scared. Not of dying. I've made peace with that. But I'm scared of leaving Lily. She's so young. She needs her mother." "She'll have me," I said. "I promise you, I will be there for her. I'll tell her stories about you. I'll make sure she knows how much you loved her. Even though I hurt you, even though you hurt me. Because being a good grandmother to Lily is more important than holding on to anger at you," Vanessa cried. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Probably not," I agreed. "But I'm giving it anyway." She died on a Tuesday morning in March, with Brandon, Lily, and me by her bedside. She was 40 years old. The funeral was small, just family and close friends. I sat in the front row this time, holding Lily's hand as she cried for her mother. Brandon gave the eulogy, and he included an apology to me as part of it. "My wife made mistakes," he said. "So did I. We hurt my mother deeply. But in her final months, my mother showed us grace and forgiveness. She taught us what it means to love unconditionally. Mom, I'm sorry for everything. Thank you for coming back to us." After the funeral, Lily moved into my house permanently. Brandon lived in the townhouse during the week, but spent weekends with us. Gradually, over the next year, we became a family again. A different family than we'd been before, shaped by loss and pain, but stronger for having survived it. Today, 3 years after Vanessa's death, Lily is 12 years old. She calls me every day after school. She sleeps over at my house most weekends. She knows the truth about what happened between me and her parents, and she's learned valuable lessons about forgiveness and second chances. Brandon and I have rebuilt our relationship. It's not the same as it was before his wedding. We've both changed too much for that. But it's real and honest and strong. People ask me how I forgave them, how I moved past a decade of pain and rejection. The truth is, I'm still working on it. Some days are easier than others. But I chose forgiveness not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I deserved to be a grandmother. I deserved to have my son back in my life. At my son's wedding, my daughter-in-law stood up and said I wasn't part of their family. She was wrong. Family isn't something you can erase with words. Family is blood and love and history. And even when that family hurts you, even when they push you away, they're still family. I lost 10 years with my son and granddaughter. I'll never get those years back. But I have now. I have today. And I have a future with them that I'm going to cherish for however many years I have left. Because in the end, love is stronger than pain. Forgiveness is stronger than bitterness. And family, real family, is worth fighting for, even when that family has hurt you deeply. My name is Eleanor Matthews. I'm 65 years old. I'm a grandmother. And I'm finally, after 10 long years, whole again. If this story touched you, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps me continue sharing stories that uncover the hidden truths of everyday life. There are many more waiting to be told. Thank you in advance for being here. Now tell me, what would you do in this person's place? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please share them with me in the comments. I'm always curious to know what you all think. With heartfelt gratitude, until next time, Mrs. Clara.